You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Servati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Servati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. And we yammer on and on about it every week here with new content. Every Tuesday on the Big Cast, you can find us via the website of the Best Innovation Group, big-fintech.com. You can also find us wherever you pick up your podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, etc., etc. We have two really great interviews this week. Going to be starting off with Greg Palmer, our old friend from Finovate, talking about their event coming up here in about a month's time in early September in New York City. And also catching up with Patrick Sells, the CEO and co-founder of True Digital, a new collaboration app around vendor optimization that I've been very intrigued by since they announced their launch just about a couple months ago. So we'll be catching up with Patrick to see what he's got to say about that. And he's going to be one of the companies on stage at Finovate, by the way. We've got some other things I want to make sure we cover as well, but I will also mention the Town Hall, the next episode or edition of the live Credit Union Town Hall hosted by the Best Innovation Group and CU Broadcast will be coming up on Wednesday, August 23rd. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific time. It'll be a continuation of what's proven to be a very popular topic around ChatGPT and generative AI in general, and its potential for use in the credit union space. We've had a lot of great feedback on the last few sessions where we've dug into that, and we're going to continue to do so. No cost to join. We encourage you to come with questions and your thinking caps because it's supposed to be an interactive exercise, and it has been, I think, and that's been part of the real great value of it. It does, as I said, no cost to join, but it does require advanced registration. If you go to the website, cutownhall.com, you can do that there. We'll also post a link to that here in the podcast, as we will about a few other things that we talk about. Always a good resource to kind of follow up with some of the hot topics of the day. So encourage you to check that out at the Best Innovation Group website. If you click through on the media tab, you'll also should be able to find that if you are listening via one of the podcast apps and click through and see those individual links that we provide. The other big piece of information or news this week that I'll just touch on briefly before getting into our big interviews, the CUNA-NAFCU merger, which was announced on, I believe it was August 1st officially that it was announced, caught me off guard. I had no idea that this was coming. If you kind of think back in hindsight, there maybe might have been a bit of foreshadowing where Dan Berger, the president of NAFCU, had announced a while back that he was going to be retiring or moving on to new opportunities at the end of the year. I clearly that's been in the news for long enough that I'm not saying that was already, it was a done deal at that point, but it probably created an added opportunity as you're looking for a successor for NAFCU's leadership to think, okay, let's rethink this model. And I've always kind of wondered about exactly why there were two separate organizations out there. I'm going to post a link to our friend Chip Filson. If you don't follow him already, his Just a Member blog, he was formerly part of leadership at Callahan and Associates, and now speaking on his own behalf. He put out a great blog around initial thoughts of where, what he saw as the pluses and minuses of this. I was not aware. I've always kind of wondered why NAFCU was out there relative to CUNA's role in the space, and he was able to answer that question without me asking. The origin story of NAFCU apparently dates back to the 1970s, and again, the F in NAFCU stands for federal, so it's a National Association of Federal Credit Unions, and apparently this was at the time that federal credit union insurance was first on the table. And apparently a group of federally chartered institutions had a somewhat different take on that than CUNA did. And that was the reason why there were two organizations out there. But the two are coming together now. I think there's obviously a lot more that unite them. In fact, probably 99.7% of things that unite them. And they'll be coming together, assuming that the vote passes. This is up for a vote. I think it's probably a pretty safe assumption that it will. But the vote is up to the members. The credit union members of each of those organizations, and that'll be taking place, I believe Dan Berger and Jim Nussel said the voting will open in late August and run for about 2 months. Assuming the passage is completed at that point, the go forward name will be America's Credit Unions, which is a name that's already in place. You'll actually find collaborative signage at websites and whatnot where the two groups, when speaking with one voice, have come together under that banner. So again, more proof that there were plenty of collaborative efforts going on already in that space. I also find it kind of interesting that the name CUNA, which has been around for so long, suddenly is going to be gone on two different levels just over the course of the last year. That we had the CUNA Mutual Group actually rebranded, as you may recall, earlier this summer to True Stage, TRU Stage, and now the remaining piece of CUNA is also retiring that name. So again, I'm sure much, much more to come on that, but I found that news to be extremely interesting. With no further ado, let's get on to the action with our conversation with Finovate's Greg Palmer. Here for my annual checkup with Greg Palmer, the host of Finovate, who I'll be seeing out in New York at Finovate New York City, September, was it 11th through 13th, I think, Greg? Did I have the dates right?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Thanks for coming again. Always enjoy these conversations. I also am really interested in hearing your perspective. I noticed that it looks like you've got a full slate of demos. It looks like it's in the 60 or so range, which, given all the press about how fintech funding is drying up, it's interesting that you've actually still got, that many folks who are ready to get up on stage. And what are you hearing on the street as far as that goes?
Yeah, well, certainly good for us to be able to have that many companies who are interested in the show. I think there's a couple different factors at play. On the one hand, it certainly helps that last fall's show was the largest event that we've ever done. So a lot of people have kind of heard that buzz and now want to come and get in front of an audience of that size. I think it also speaks to the fact that Finovate is obviously a great place to get a lot of value for marketing spend, and that's the feedback that we consistently get from the companies who do get up on stage. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of pressure on those companies. It's very much a sink or swim environment, but if you're able to use that 7 minutes really well, there's still a lot of benefit that can come from it. So, at a time when more and more importance is being placed on how companies are spending their money from the venture capital side, it's great to see that Finovate still kind of meets that requirement. So we're obviously incredibly happy to be able to have a very full slate of companies this fall, and it'll be a very full house as well. We're pacing on par or a little bit above last year's attendance numbers as well.
Wow. I mean, I think you've kind of partially answered this question then, but I'm curious, given the environment out there in the fundraising space and whatnot, are you seeing anything different in terms of the objectives of the firms getting up on stage? Are they looking for funding? Are they looking for partners? Are they looking for customers or first beta testers? What any kind of theme of why they're what brings them to the table?
Sure. Well, absolutely. I think everybody's always looking for funding, right? So that's kind of an ever-present, certainly more so now than before, as it's become more difficult to get capital. The goal of doing that is something which is elevated in a lot of our presenters' minds. I think the other piece is there, as we were kind of talking about, there's a greater pressure for companies to become profitable more quickly, right? To demonstrate that return on investment from the part of the venture capitalists. So what that means is that going out and getting those paying customers more quickly is something which is on the top of mind of all of the companies who are coming to demo. So certainly those two factors are contributing quite a bit. I think the other thing that's really interesting for us to see is, there's, as we've kind of got a couple years past the pandemic now, there's a lot more emphasis being placed on the success stories. And a lot of the demoing companies who are coming, obviously, to do their demo are also coming to learn and hear success stories or best practices when it comes to engaging with certain aspects of the financial institution marketplace. And I think that's a really cool piece as well. There are now starting to be people who said, okay, since 2021, here's what's changed. Here's what you can do about it. And so our demoing companies, of course, they want to have the connections, they want to grow their own companies, but a lot of them are realizing that the best way to do that is to have those conversations and hear from people who've been able to understand a little bit more what this kind of new normal looks like.
And I mean, some of those conversations in my mind even kind of take place on stage. I don't know if my perception is I've seen a few more recently where obviously, the demo, the fact that Finovate has to be a demo, it's not slideware, it's actually something that you're showing that's in production. But my sense is I've seen a few more companies get up there with a partner that says, look, we're actually doing this with, whether it's a financial institution or a merchant or somebody like that, and they come up arm in arm and show what they've actually got in production, which to me is yet one other way to kind of say, hey, this is real. I mean, am I
Oh,
wrong? Is there a little
absolutely.
bit more of that going on these days, or do you think that's kind of the direction people are taking?
Well, I think it's certainly something that more of our demoing companies want to do. Now, there's a lot of reasons that that might not be possible, right? Financial institutions aren't always able to get up and be shown to endorse a specific technology, but it is true that the companies who are able to do that get a lot out of the event. And from a financial institution standpoint, there's a really good impetus to do that as well because it shows that you are an FI that is plugged into the fintech ecosystem. So we're seeing more FIs who are comfortable filling that role. Um, and I think that's a really good thing. I always think about the JP Nichols quote that bankers are a group of people who line up to go second. And so
Yeah,
for everybody in the audience, seeing somebody up there saying, "Hey, we're working with this company, it's gone well," it really moves the needle. So I expect to see more people doing that to the extent that they're able to and allowed to by their financial institution partners.
I'm glad you gave JP the credit on that one because I remember hearing that, but I forgot who said it. That is a brilliant one. And when you talk about getting involved, I think you and I talked about this a bit before. It seems that I continue to see more credit union involvement too, which of course, does my heart good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's I don't want to say it's a surprise to us because it's a market that we've been courting now for several years. But we've noticed over the past couple of years, more and more of the companies on our stage are targeting their solutions at smaller financial institutions. And we've had good relationships with the ICBA and the ABA, and we're getting some community bankers. And now we're starting to see those credit union attendees coming in as well. And I think part of that is we're seeing people developing solutions specifically for credit unions. And so I think this is something which is really positive for us. We absolutely want to keep it going. And we're looking at how we can expand our offerings specifically for credit union attendees because we know it's a little bit different and some of their concerns are a little bit different from what other folks in the audience might be thinking about. And we want to make sure that they're able to find something valuable in the event as well. To the extent that now we're going to start asking our demoing companies, are you giving your technology for credit unions? Is it something that's available to them? Just even giving them a little tick box that they can kind of self-select in so that anybody coming from a credit union can really quickly see, oh, these are all the people who have had credit unions in mind as they built their technologies. So we're hoping that we'll be able to get that functionality up by Finovate Fall. If not by fall, then certainly by Finovate Spring next year. And we want to continue to expand our outreach to that credit union space because there's so much innovation happening there. And those are organizations which are really up for it in many cases. A lot of them are driven by members who want new technology. They're maybe able to move a little more quickly than some of the larger financial institutions in the space. And in many cases, they're just more in tune with what their customers are thinking and are able to use fintech in a way that's more targeted and delivers more immediate results. So it's something that we're really excited by. We absolutely want to keep it coming. And so, if you're anybody out there listening from a credit union standpoint, please do join us at Finovate Fall this year. Check it out. And we'd love to talk with you after the event to continue to develop new pieces which will add value for that side of the ecosystem.
Yeah, let's definitely continue that conversation because I've seen that trend, and I'd love to try to increase that side of the audience as well as the audience already continues to grow too. This one's a little bit off topic, but I'm just kind of curious. I remember, I don't know if it was just last year or how many shows back, I've seen a few different solutions. One of the conversations that came up in a few different demos, the whole idea of wealth management and actually being sure from a compliance standpoint that they can track the communications that are taking place between brokers and their clients. And now that we've got the multimedia, multimodal kind of thing, you got to watch text, you got to watch emails, you got telephone calls, you got all these different things and tracking them down. The SEC just came out and said they want to start looking to make sure that emojis are not a way that people are communicating, the barfy face, might be a way to let someone know that maybe you don't want to buy that stock or whatever. Have you heard, because that just jumped out at me as, that feels kind of like the next step of some of the stuff I've seen on stage. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Well, I think you're right that it seems like it's the next step. And I don't think we have anything along those lines yet, although I'm certain this news from the SEC is going to push people that direction. And when you start thinking about the universe of potential emojis, there's so many jokes that you could make, and you realize how difficult the job of regulators actually is. And I think this is one of the things that I sometimes like to call attention because sometimes regulators get a bad rap, right? There's a lot of things that they do that add work to processes and kind of keep them from being as efficient and quick as we would like. but you see the challenge that they're up against, where, even something as simple as a thumbs up emoji, is that financial advice? Are you saying that, this is a sure thing? Or, the barfing face emoji, get away from that stock? At what point are we looking at, are you actually sending a concrete message here? There's always been a little bit of this kind of like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of thing when it comes to the way wealth management companies deal with compliance. And there's ways that people try and circumvent that. And so from my standpoint, I love to see the SEC being aware of this. I think it speaks to also the future of Finovate, in terms of, there's obviously now got to be a wave of new companies that are going to have to be able to deal with this. Existing companies are going to have to be able to deal with this. And to be totally honest with you, I have no idea how. I have no idea how they're going to go about solving that problem. And whenever you have a situation like that, and that's come up several times in my time in fintech, when you get to a point where you're like, how are they ever going to solve this? That's where it gets really interesting, because that's when we start to see really unique companies up on stage. That creative side of fintech comes back in, and you get people trying to tackle the same problem in multiple different ways. And when it becomes kind of that battleground state is where it gets really exciting for me. So I think, as they say, watch this space.
Yeah.
And let's see how far somebody can go with it. And on the one hand, you could say, can we really just, do we need emojis to communicate? Can we just say no emojis for official communications? But you and I both know that's not how human beings work.
No.
That technology is out there. It's fun. Of course, we're going to communicate with emojis. So yeah, I mean, as they say, watch this space.
And I'm thinking the exact same thing around generative AI. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't use it. Well, that's fine. We're going to use it. So
Right.
figure out. And I would be stunned if we don't see a fairly decent representation of some of the solutions around either monitoring it or using it effectively or whatever, on this stage. I don't know if you can speak to that at this point, but I've got to assume, maybe I'll even make that one of my tally marks, to see how many companies are actually kind of speaking to ChatGPT and the like over the course of 2 days of demos.
Yeah, there'll certainly be some. And in fact, it's actually our first full keynote on the 11th. We're going to start the day with demos, as we usually do. And after our first panel of demos, the very first keynote we have is going to be about generative AI and conversational AI and how that's transforming banking. So it's absolutely something which is on the top of, I think, everybody's mind right now, certainly on the top of ours. And we're going to, as I said, we're going to start the show off. And we've actually got a book signing as well, from an author named Thomas Chamorro Premizic. And his book is, his talk will be about AI automation and the kind of quest for humanity, what makes us unique. So it's something that we'll definitely be covering a lot. And I'm sure a lot of our demoing companies will be talking about that space as well.
I think you're kind of bridging into one of the other questions I had of any particular kind of new features that are, exciting to you. And that's one right there. I mean, we're moving toward Gen AI, and I know there's keynotes kind of sprinkled in, so you're not just all demo all the time on Monday or Tuesday, but then you've got the content tracks on Wednesday as well. But I know my favorites are a lot of times the analyst all-stars and things like that come up. Anything else that comes to mind that you're particularly excited about this cycle around?
Yeah, definitely. So, Analyst All-Stars is always, I think, one of the most informative sessions of the show. I love how we kind of condense them down to just 7 minutes as well. And it really forces them to bring their best ideas and give them to the audience very quickly. I think the venture capital panel is going to be a really interesting one this time around, because there's been so much talk about what's going on in the VC space. And there's always a difference between what a venture capitalist can tell you kind of in person backstage versus what they can actually say up on stage in front of an audience in a situation where it's being recorded. But there's so much negative press around the funding and where people are at right now. But when you talk to venture capitalists, a lot of them on a personal level are very optimistic about what their plans are. And a lot of them have very big plans in terms of what they want to go out and fund. And so I think this is one where getting the perspective of that group is going to be very interesting. So that's absolutely a session to watch. Other pieces which we've been kind of developing over the last little bit, but the Startup Booster Program is something which we are really excited by. We've now trialed this at a couple of shows, and this is a chance for very early stage companies to come to Finovate at a very discounted rate, so that they can come and kind of learn from the industry, see where the bar is, and also connect with venture capitalists who self-select in and say, I'm interested in meeting these early stage companies.
And again, to be
And
clear on that one, they're not on stage, but this is a chance for kind of a, like you say, kind of speed dating almost for them to
yes,
get together with the venture capitalists.
exactly right. Yeah, they're not ready to demo quite yet. Our hope certainly is that many of them will go on and become demoers later on. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is just the number of those early stage companies continues to surprise us. So certainly, there are new companies getting funded. Maybe it's not the same amounts that they would have gotten, 4 years ago, but there are new companies coming out of the woodwork all the time. And I think that's one of the things which is really positive as well. So any venture capitalist interested in kind of seeing, what the cutting edge looks like, or even maybe the bleeding edge, which is not a phrase that I typically like saying, but maybe applies here. And anybody who wants to kind of check that out is more than welcome. And on the other side, the interest from venture capitalists in that community has been really strong too. So there are little signs that point to the fact that maybe more funding is coming. Maybe it's about to be a friendlier funding environment. But at the very least, we can say, innovation continues regardless of the funding environment. There's still good ideas getting funding, and they're coming to shows like Finovate.
I think that that's a great way to kind of bring it full circle because, the green shoots are still sprouting. The venture
Yeah.
capitalists are going to be there. And I kind of think of it almost as like the yin and the yang because you've got the analyst all stars, but when you get them in kind of more of a fireside chat type discussion, I agree that venture capital, panel that usually comes up toward the end is always extremely informative too.
Yeah, well, and I like the kind of talking about the yin and the yang because it is a balance. And I think in some cases, when you see too much funding going into the ecosystem, which is probably where we were in 2018, 2019, it reduces the pressure on the companies themselves who get that funding to return that investment quickly. Right now, companies who get funding are getting more pressure from their investors to demonstrate a path to profitability more quickly. And guess what? That's turning into a lot more profitable fintech companies because they have that pressure. So I think that pressure maybe does something good for the ecosystem. I'm not saying that we necessarily have the balance right now, but I think there is value in the scarcity of funding because it does push companies to get serious more quickly. And I think we're kind of seeing that as well. The companies coming to Finovate right now maybe have a little bit better understanding of their message. It's less, here's cool technology. Does anybody know where we can point it? And more, here's cool technology and here's how it saves you money today. Here's how it solves a problem for you today.
Yep.
And I think that seriousness is something which is really positive.
Makes sense. And for those who want to get serious about coming to Finovate, I believe you've got a discount code for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So the code BIG20 will save anybody who enters it in 20% off their ticket. And as I said, this fall's event is shaping up to be a very large one. Last year was our largest event ever, which is absolutely amazing on the heels of the pandemic. So we're really excited to be coming back. We've got a great slate of companies, a great slate of speakers for everybody to listen to. And I certainly hope as many people as possible join us.
I'll tell you what, if any of the credit unions actually use that discount coupon as well, I'll make sure you get an extra croissant as well.
There we go.
Can't turn that down. Greg, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. September 11th through 13th, Midtown Manhattan, right? Same place?
That's exactly right. Same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. We'll be back in Midtown at the Marriott Marquis. Don't let the fact that it's in Midtown put you off. There's other aspects of New York which are much cooler, and it's only a small subway ride away. Or, of course, the hotel and the venue itself is extremely nice.
Yeah, and I always visit my daughter in Brooklyn while I'm there too. Greg Palmer from Finovate. Can't wait to see you in about a month.
Sounds good. Can't wait as well. And thanks again, Glenn, for the time. Always a pleasure.
Take care.
Always enjoy catching up with Greg. As he mentioned, Big 20, BIG 20. I don't know if the caps are required, but I sure spell it that way. If you enter that in, if you are so inclined to show up at Finovate, September 11th through the 13th in New York City coming up. And I got nothing against Midtown. I'm looking forward to getting out there. Always a little bit expensive in the hotel range, but other than that. But use that code at the website and you'll get a 20% discount for being a big listener. Hey, we like to help you out there. And again, we'll be following up and providing more coverage of the companies that actually really strike our fancy that we see right there on site. One of those companies that struck my fancy already, even before I knew they were going to be involved in Finovate, was True Digital, which launched earlier this summer, as I mentioned. And Patrick Sells. I've been trying to track him down for some time between both of our summer vacations. That took a little bit longer than I expected. And by the time I did, I discovered lo and behold, he's going to be on stage at Finovate. So figured it was a nice opportunity to kind of combine these two. Let's have a listen to where Patrick stands and what he might be previewing or kind of debuting on the stage at Finovate.
I'm here with Patrick Sells, the co-founder and CEO of True Digital. I've been reading a good bit about your platform for the last couple of months, Patrick. You're off to a nice start, but you've got a really interesting background that's relevant to this space. If you don't mind, let me just kind of turn the microphone over to you. Talk a bit, if you would, about your background and what it was that brought you to the idea that became True Digital.
Sure, and thanks for having me on today, Glenn. I think, I got into the financial services industry for the first time about 6-7 years ago when I took the position of Chief Innovation Officer at Quantic Bank. Admittedly, I knew very little about how banks actually work, despite having been an entrepreneur and a business owner before that. And showed up really with the task or the mandate of helping transform it into a digital bank. I thought that would be like, any other company or industry initially, but very quickly realized banks are far more complicated from a technology standpoint and innovation standpoint. But as I went through that process, really fell in love with community banking and the banking industry. And one of the things that we did at Quantic, and we were the first to do so, was a Bitcoin rewards debit card. And I had spent 2.5 years working on getting that approved and able to launch from a legal and regulatory perspective. And right after launching it, went to the vendor that was our partner, NYDIG, to help take that solution we had done for Quantic and bring it to the industry at large.
And I remember that's why I think Quantic wound up becoming at least in select circles, a much bigger name than a typical bank of that size would have nationally.
Yes. Had an amazing time at Quantic, great group of people, and really the key to the transformation there was cultural. But this was one of the things we had done. And when I got to NYDIG, really the passion for me was about being able to bring something at the forefront of innovation, Bitcoin, but in a safe and sound way to banks to be able to make that available. And during that time, I got to talk to just about 1,000 different banks and credit unions across the country. And it was in the collective experience that formed the genesis of what now is True Digital. I think at Quantic, it seemed like that all the challenges we had to have been unique to us, our size, our history, etc. But I very quickly realized, no, it doesn't really matter what size of bank or a brand. It's just really hard when it comes to vendors and innovation and technology. And seeing that consistency and having been on both the buyer and the seller side, said, okay, what if we could do something that would just make it easier for banks? Ultimately, it helps vendors too, because I think they would agree that the process is friction-filled and inefficient. But that was the initial kind of seed was, what can we do to make it easier for banks to use and adopt technology and vendors for innovation?
So, and I think the platform you're doing obviously is exactly geared toward that. Now, I have seen I know that CMFG Ventures has a platform that they are trying to do some of the same kind of information sharing. I think a couple of maybe the state banking associations are doing something. You've got, as I understand it, it's a membership model. It's a subscription-based model, right? One of those typical things. It's like, I understand the value, but in the case of True Digital, someone's got to actually pay, as opposed to in others where it may be baked into their membership fee of their dues, or maybe even free entirely. Can you speak to the value proposition and how you think you can kind of get over that hurdle?
Again, going back to like my time at NYDIG, I remember vividly there was a bank and they were the first ones to go live on, the core that they had and online banking platform. And they were having some challenges with it. And they asked if we knew anyone else, they could speak to. We didn't have another bank that had the same kind of vendors as they did, but we did have a credit union. And we were saying, hey, I'll make that introduction. And Cattell was a little bit unsure, but the introduction worked out great, and they were able to quickly resolve the issue. And I think when I think about what we've done is we've tried to build a network that's big bank, big credit union, little credit union, because we know that the larger the denominator of a network, the more powerful it is for all participants. And that's one of the ways that I think we're different. I think we also, in many cases, have found or will be forming partnerships with many existing associations and industry players. Kind of at the heart of True Digital is saying, look, there's a lot of great things that exist in this industry. We don't want to compete. If we can help or partner, great. Let's try to fill in the gaps of what doesn't exist. And so, that's kind of an overarching thesis or spirit of what we're doing. I think the other big part of it is, again, looking at where you can go to the industry today, there's places you can get data or information about vendors or fintechs, but in many cases that data is either not all that, highly valid or verified, or it's information that may be interesting to a non-banker, but it doesn't take into account the nuances and the uniqueness of the world a bank lives in. And so, we have all member verified data about vendors. It's sourced from your peers, if you will.
I was going to say that, to me, that was where I saw a real distinctive difference. Is everything on your site is coming from the financial institutions. You're not posting collaterals or inputs. I mean, I think you do actually do some like press release tracking, but in terms of the inputs, it's not, this is what the vendor told us we do. This is what the bank is telling us the vendor does for us.
Correct. I think we have the largest, member verified or bank verified, credit union verified vendor database registry in the world today. We've received over 500,000 unique records now, lots of duplicates there, but we have vendors from armored trucks to aircraft management, ATM, fintechs, etc. And all of that has been verified. And as a member of our network, you can speak to someone else who has that relationship. I think where, one other point of difference is, though it's a two-sided marketplace, vendor and bank, we only generate revenue from the bank or credit union side. And so we're not in any way trying to influence a decision. We're not paid by vendors. We don't resell data. And so it's meant to be a very kind of industry-owned utility, if you will, for those in financial services to connect with each other.
And from what I think I saw, you use kind of it's a give and get model. Basically the expectation when you sign up is you're sharing your information. You're not just pulling it on the other side, because it's only as powerful as everybody bringing their experience to the table.
Correct. It's very much a give to get model. And I think, that there's something deeply important for the industry here, that the community and regional financial institutions in the singular will, of course, struggle to compete with the biggest banks and big tech. It's through collaboration as an industry we can, be able to far more competitively, play and compete and innovate for our communities. And so very much a give to get model. That is a requirement to be a member. You cannot just be a user of the platform.
And I remember seeing that you've actually got things sorted. So, okay, if I'm a $100 million bank or credit union, a 25 billion is not going to be terribly relevant, but I can do my searches just on who are other peers that are roughly my size that I can actually reach to.
Correct. You can sort through it all in a myriad of ways, from primary federal regulator, other vendors like a core online banking, and someone you're looking at by size. And even when you're wanting to connect with another bank, are you in the discovery phase or implementation? Is it legal or ops or business? And so the ability to really find the right counterpart to speak to or to understand about their experience with the vendor.
This all sounds really great on an altruistic level, and I know you've put some kind of guardrails in place. Can you talk a little bit? I know that to prevent this just from becoming a competitive intelligence tool and people not being concerned about giving away too much of their proprietary knowledge and information. Can you say a little bit how you've kind of covered that?
Yeah, so two buckets of comments. One is like actually what we've done. And so while you can understand and see the banks or credit unions that use a certain product you may be looking at, there's no ability to see any other product or vendor that one of those banks listed uses. We did that by making it a product-centric navigation. And we did that by saying, okay, look, there's only a natural amount of vendors someone would be looking up if you were employed at a bank or credit union. in a second, an hour, a minute, a day, etc. And so we have throttles on that if we see any type of like scraping or bad behavior, which I don't think we generally will. And so, but I think very key to the traction has been how to walk that line between harnessing the power of collaboration, but not inviting the risk of, giving away competitive information or secret sauce. And so, that we've been able to walk through that and work through that with everyone to date. I think kind of more at a meta level, when I look at it, the reality is banks' vendor stacks are so complicated, and the different ways they use certain vendors or products and their overall risk management framework and way they have their customers, that in reality, another bank is very unlikely to be able to or want to really all that quickly like copy something you've done. And actually, just as an aside, I've tried to find a bank, as I socially and casually talk to friends in the industry, that has actually had something like that happened. So far, I can't find any actual story of how another bank or credit union copied a vendor decision and it created some type of competitive issue.
I could definitely. I have a hard time seeing I could see the concern. I have a hard time building a real scenario around that. What about the vendor side? I mean, do the vendors even have access to the database, or do they get a different view?
So vendors don't get access to the platform. We have shown it to many vendors, and I would say almost universally received very positive feedback from vendors. Probably 25-30% of the banks and credit unions that are members were actually introduced to us by a vendor. I think, again, going back to vendors know the pain just as much as the bank. When you spend 6 months and then you realize it just was never going to work, that's very costly for both sides. And so I think they see this platform as an ability to actually help have better conversations and more conversations and avoid certain conversations. And by the nature of the platform, there's no sentiment captured. And I think that also helped assuage any concerns they'd have about someone, saying something and not being able to respond. And so vendors don't have access to it, but they are a great partner of ours, if you will, and understand that ultimately it has to get easier for banks for it to be easier for them.
Am I remembering correctly? You went live. I mean, I don't know technically if you're still kind of in a soft launch or whatever, but you've been out there for a couple of months now, 2-3 months, and you've got, I think, did I hear about 1,000 products represented and roughly 100 FIs on the network?
So we have, we started this business really at the beginning of this year. We pushed the site into production late spring. We have received over 500,000 unique records at this point. Over 3,000 unique products, I think.
It's even more than I thought. Wow.
3,000 unique products is the latest, and we have over 300 commitments or onboarded. And so with each new member, it gets a lot easier to onboard because there's less net new vendors or products we need to go research. And so, but yeah, I think we'll finish the year well over 300, given where we already are today.
Yeah, so you got the flywheel turning clearly. So I know you're going to be on stage at Finovate in September. I think, I wouldn't want to call it your kind of public unveiling, because obviously you're out there already. But that's going to be the first kind of major, national kind of marquee presence you've got. Specific things you're going to be bringing out there, new features or whatnot. What's the message you're going to be bringing to Finovate? Tell people to show up to find out.
Very much looking forward to being there. I always enjoy that event. I think it will be kind of the first time we've been on a national stage, if you will. And we've got some features we'll be talking about on the platform side that I know many banks are excited about and have requested. But it's also going to be an opportunity for us to unveil the fuller true digital vision and what else we've been working on. Platform today is a pretty lightweight, cheap option, and surprising how many times the banks will say, well, wait a minute, if you're only getting paid this much, why does this make sense, or what else is going on? And that's where I think that the fuller product offering in business will be very exciting. We've shared it in stealth mode with many banks and gotten great feedback, and so looking to use Finovate as that opportunity to really open up the kimono, if you will.
I'm very interested to hear that. Obviously, a tall order in 7 minutes on stage, but I'm sure there's a lot of sidebar conversations that will be taking place along the way too. If people want to find out more before Finovate, what's the best way to find out about True Digital? Website, I assume?
Website, patrick@truedigitalgroup.com or LinkedIn. We'd love to have the conversations.
And it's truedigitalgroup.com is the website.
Correct.
Wonderful. Patrick Sells, CEO and co-founder of the new platform. We take a look at a lot of good collaboration in the financial industry space, True Digital. Looking forward to seeing you on stage in New York in September.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn.
So there you have it, one of the 60 plus companies that will be on stage at Finovate, and one of the newer ones, presumably, given that True Digital only launched over the course of the last couple months and already looking at expanding their product offering and scope of their service. So very much interested in seeing what True Digital has to offer there on site. With that, another episode of the Big Cast in the books. Again, my name is Glenn Sarvati. You can track me down via my firm, 154 Advisors, on LinkedIn or X. I'm still having a really hard time saying that. I'm going to still call it Twitter. I don't care. You'll also find the Best Innovation Group, as I said before, at the website big-fintech.com. You'll find them on X at Big Fintech. You'll find our grand poobah, John Best, at JB Fintech, as well as on LinkedIn. If you put in John Best Innovation, you'll get there, because obviously there's a few John Bests out there. We will be back with next week. I already know pretty much what we'll be talking about, but I'll save the suspense and let you guys find that out when we post next week with new content. As I said before, Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you are so inclined, follow us there, like us there, subscribe to us so you know when the new episodes are out, or just check out at the website every Tuesday for new content. As always, thanks for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big Fintech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.